and love. Do what only you can do and make all things new. Only you can bring such beauty from the depths of all my pain. Only you can take this shattered heart and make it beat again. Oh, you hold us all together in your hands. I surrender all I have and all I am. You make all things new. You make all things new. God of mercy and love, do what only you can do and make all things new. When I sing the chorus next time, put your name in there. Say, you make me new. From the ashes, from the dust, I will rise up, out of darkness into the light. I will rise up from the ashes, from the dust. I will rise up out of darkness into the light. I will rise up. You make all things new. You make all things new. God of mercy and love, do what only you can do and make all things, you make all things new. You make all things new.
Wow. Knew there was a reason I married her for something. So it wasn't just that. Tuesday nights we have Bible study over at our house. And just usually, since it's kind of my style anyway, I always start off with a question. So there's always a question, and usually it will deal with part of what I'm trying to get across that night. So I got a question for you. What frightens you the most? And this is going to be kind of like a y'all and I kind of thing. So what frightens you the most? Give me an example. Spiders? All right, we got spiders. What else? Dams? Okay. I'll have to ask about that later. What else? Dying before his children. Wow. Now that is something. I would think that a lot of parents have that fear. Matter of fact, I heard it was like in a movie or something, and they said parents should not survive their children. Or yeah. What else? What are the things kind of frighten you? Okay. All right. Spiders. Well, you got more spiders. And that's kind of funny because yesterday, we're teachers, so my wife is starting a week earlier than I am, and she was putting her room together. And if you're a teacher, you know what that means. But over the break, she had asked the janitors, "You go in there and dry clean or carpet clean my carpets on there." And so they didn't do it. So, and we have a carpet cleaner at the house, and I'm the one that runs it. So she said, "Baby, will you do this for me? Will you clean my carpets?" So that's what I was doing yesterday morning. Was I went up to her school with our carpet cleaner and I did it, and I was in the midst of cleaning up there's a bucket that has all the nasty stuff in it. So I poured it out and put it in the sink, and I turn around and there's a huge cockroach. Those things make me want to hurt myself. I'm not necessarily scared of them, but if you're not expecting them, and it was that long, I mean, it was a big honker. So uh, I think the number one fear that most people have is speaking. I still kind of have that a little bit. I mean, I know I get up here and as a teacher, I talk every day. So you would think after a while that would go around, but you can tell. I know most people go, I felt for you, baby. You got up there and you were trembling a little bit, but the Holy Spirit came in and everything went all right. And it's like, yeah. So that's the thing I want. So public speaking is probably number one. You always hear of other things. When I was younger, different times in my life, I've had different fears. When I was younger, it was speaking. So, I mean, I was shy. I was painfully shy when I was a kid. So I just did not want to talk in front of anybody. And God got rid of that for the most part. But when I was got a little bit older, when I was in college, my biggest fear was not being good enough. One, to be in college, because if you knew my record in high school, it was, I graduated come lucky in high school. I was dead middle. That was where my GPA was. I barely passed in high school, so college was a big thing. Going to college at all, I was the first person in 5 generations of my family to go to college, even. And the first one, actually, my aunt beat me by 1 semester, so she was the first one to get a degree, but I'm the first one to have a master's. So anyway, but I was so scared of not being good enough to go to college. That fear stayed with me. And of course, my dad, my stepdad, actually, Richard, I didn't want to let him down. I never wanted him to look at me and not be proud. So I got A after A after A, and I said every time I made an A, it was for him. It was for him. So basically, he owned my degree when I finished. I was not 4.0, but I was a 3.8, which was really close. I had 1 B, the rest were A's. That teacher still. But when I came back, and I did that in Colorado, when I came back was when I was lost. I was lost as a goose, and when I got back, God caught a hold of me and changed my life forever. But then I had a new fear that carries on even now, and I don't want to let God down. And anyone that's gone to seminary, basically we hold the Word of God very in high esteem. And I don't ever want to be a person who does not treat it where it's supposed to. I hear some preachers that, so-called preachers, that don't even mention Jesus or God in their sermons. I don't want to be that guy. I'm so afraid of doing that. So over the years, my thing is, every preacher has kind of their thing that they stick on. Some have they'll tell stories about that they like a certain passage. For me, it's Hebrews, and we're going to touch on Hebrews tonight. But for me, my thing is the Christian walk. If you can't think about it, because last Wednesday I was talking about the Christian walk, I'm talking about the Christian walk today. But there's a big amount of fear that goes into that, because I don't ever want to treat the Word of God lightly. If you have your Bibles, because we don't have the overhead tonight, what I was going to do is I was going to go, okay, in Hebrews 1 through 3, actually, we're chapter 12 of Hebrews, and we're going to be in the first 3 verses. And I was going to turn around and nothing was going to be there. And I go, oh yeah, I forgot. But I won't do that. So I want to go through it real quick, and then we're going to dissect the text. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. See, the Christian walk is not an easy walk. All those of you who have been around for a while know that. There are times, if we were to plot a graph, since I'm a teacher, I'm going to use teaching words. The graph would kind of look like this. We have valleys, we have mountaintops, and our faith kind of goes in that thing. Sometimes we're on the mountaintop and we live it, and some of the times we're down in the valley and it's just the worst thing in the world. We think the world is going to end and that we've lost favor, but we go through these valleys and stuff. Man, I forgot part of my joke earlier. Jeez. Talking about fears. I'm going to go back to that real quick because I really liked it. See, as a teacher, I have a fear. Okay, and it usually is when I walk through the doors at Walmart. Everybody can identify that, and they have school supplies for the first time. And that happened to me like 2 weeks ago. I walked through and I lamented while we went around the store. They hate us. They don't like us. Because school's here, and in another week I've got to go back. My baby's got to go back Monday. But I thought that was funny, actually, so I was going to tell you anyway. Now, going through this passage is a little difficult because the first words in here are therefore. And I know you've heard it before, but wherever you see it therefore, you got to wonder, what is it there for? Why is it there? And basically, it's therefore chapter 11, which is the previous chapter. And for those of you that know the book of Hebrews, we know that chapter 11 is the great hall of faith. And all the people who have gone through it, through life as a believer are in there. It starts with Abel. It goes down and then it hits Moses. We have Joshua in there. We have all the biggies. Aaron's in there. We even have Rahab the harlots in there. We go through and it says, Moses did this. Actually, it says 2 places for Moses. One that he brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and the other one he passed through the sea on dry land. It's amazing. Each of these people have kind of, it's like for guys, it's like doing the baseball stats. They has their RBIs, they have their how many home runs that they've done in that series. Everything that you needed to know about that player is in it. And then in the 11th chapter of Hebrews, that's kind of the who's who of the Bible. Like I said, it starts with Abel and it goes through. So just if we're going to bless you, sketch a booger, tail's on fire. If we're just going to look at that, man, we go up to that hall of fame and we kind of go, well, where am I in this? And it doesn't get better as it goes by. As you get further and further in the list, it gets actually kind of dark in some places. If I can find it in my notes. At the very end, it says, don't want to go there. Okay, so the authors mentioned Abel, Noah, Moses, but then it goes into people like Gideon. It says Gideon who led Israel to victory over the Midianites. Still, it's pretty all right. Barak, the great judge, alongside Deborah. The only thing wrong with Barak is that he refused to go into battle unless Deborah came along, which kind of I have to question that one a little bit. Talks about Samson. It said Samson who won strength out of weakness. Jephthah who fought against the Ammonites. David, one of the greatest and also most flawed king of Israel had known. Samuel the prophet. And it has an allusion to Daniel very, very far. And then it gets, see, these are still the good ones. These are the ones that you would trade to your friends. You know, I got a Daniel. Do you got a Abel? You know, if we're talking about trading cards again. But then it goes on. Down at the bottom of this part, it talks about this. It said, women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refused to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and floggings and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. So it went from those that we want to emulate, those Moses and Joshua, to those who suffered. And again, I'm saying we get this list, and where do I fit in here? Okay, I like the first ones, and they're all right, but I want to be in this bottom list. But what about me? Where do I fit in this grand scale of things? And so we have to go back to the passage itself. The first thing it says is therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, he's talking about those of the faith that came before us, the Baraks, the Samuels, the Samsons. The good, the bad, and the ugly of the Bible are here. Well, what about us? How is this supposed to influence how we walk as a Christian? You know, the worst thing that I get to do is when somebody makes fun of me for being a Christian. How does that measure up to someone who gave their life, who was sawn in two? How do we do that? And at that, it says we have this cloud of witnesses, and it's a little unfair. When I first became a Christian, I thought, like a lot of people thought, that they were up there on clouds watching us, seeing what we were up to down here. I guarantee you, they don't care about us. They'll care about us when we're there, but right now, they're too busy. They're too busy. And frankly, they don't want to be part of this world anymore. So what's the deal? This huge cloud of witnesses, what does this mean? He says, These are the ones that came before. These are the ones that paved the way for you. If things get easier for you, be thankful, because the times aren't always going to be that good. I mean, we look at the papers and we see about persecution around the world. We have people in other countries. Persecution is out there. It's in Africa. It's in the Middle East. Where they're being drowned and they're being killed and stuff like that. It's not going to touch here, but yet there will be a day that it does. That's when we're going to need this cloud of witnesses to say, we did it too. And we look at all these people and we look at people like Moses and go, Moses was so great. He was a mighty man of God. But I'm telling you, he wasn't a mighty man of God. He was just a man with a mighty God. It was God who did it through them. It wasn't them. But still, we have our part. We have our part in this walk that we call the Christian walk. And whether you're going through, if you lose your business, because, I mean, talk about, there are lawsuits going through ones that's about to go through the Supreme Court. And someone else is suing someone else because they won't bake a cake for them, or they won't do something else for them. And the whole thing is that it's become sport for the people outside of the faith. They are targeting people specifically because they're Christians, because they say, I won't take pictures at your gay wedding. I won't do a cake for you at your gay wedding. And they're being taken to court. Their businesses are being taken away. It may be light persecution, but it's persecution, and it's coming here. And there will be a day when our walk with God we're going to have to stand there and go, yes, I'm a Christian, and suffer the slings and arrows of every outrageous fortune, to quote Shakespeare. We're going to have to do that in our time. And we have the examples. They says, we went through this. You can go through this. All these people are witness to what they had to go through, and said, you can go through it too. I don't want to get too far on that. It says that we have to do two things in particular. The first part is to let us also lay aside every encumbrance. And the second part is, and the sin which so easily entangles us. There's two parts to this. He talks about encumbrances. It's anything that is heavy, that keeps us from doing what we're supposed to do. You know that doesn't have to be a bad thing. There are things that are really good that if we do them would be considered good, but if it keeps us away from our walk, our commitment to God, it becomes a bad thing. Even your children. Man, I love my children, don't get me wrong. But when we got married, the day I said I do, I became a father. So, but I love my children. But when my wife and I got married, I told her, I said, God's always number one. You're going to be number two. And then we can figure out who's below that. But God has to be my number one always. If it's a matter, I love my wife. If it's between doing something for my wife or doing something for God, I'm going to do it for God. Luckily, he does a lot of things that I can do for my wife that is for God, and he allows me to do that too. But if I have to make a decision, my wife is second to God. But we can get into things in itself. We were made for work. If you go back to Genesis, God created us to work. He gave Adam the first job. Go out there and name the animals. When things went bad, he says, you're going to toil. by the sweat of your brow are you going to produce food. And we've been doing it ever since. But work in itself is not a bad thing. It actually gives us our place. And men, as we go forward, no offense to women, but we're losing our identity as men because we're not able to do what God has actually created us to do. But even our work can become something that is bad, that is coming between our responsibility to our family and our responsibility to God. If we start putting things away just because, man, if I work a little bit harder, I can get that boat, and my kids get to go skiing behind the boat, or we can go on that vacation. Vacations are wonderful things. We can take them to all these historical places, and they can learn all these things. In itself, that's a good thing, but if it comes between you and God, it's a bad thing. So he says, lay aside everything that makes you stumble. Everything. If it comes between you and God, set it aside. And what's the second side? That second one is even worse because it says, and the sin. See, we usually think that a cumbrance, something that's going to hinder us, is a sin. But he says it's good things that can make you stumble. But the second part is we have that sin that so easily tangles it up. I don't know your sin. I don't know your sin. I don't know your sin. But there's a sin that is particular to you. See, I don't fall for a lot of things. I think my favorite sin is gluttony. And I do that when I go to the Chinese restaurant and I eat too much. But I laugh. But really, each of us has that sin that trips us up, that we are susceptible to. No matter how hard we try to get rid of that sin, it's the one that makes us stumble. It's the one that trips us up every time. And we can tiptoe around it and push it to the side. But it's the one that sneaks up behind us and taps us on the shoulder and says, I'm still here. I'm still here, and you got to deal with me. It's that sin that trips us up every time. The next part of that first verse has two words that I want to talk about. The last part, it says, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. There's two words. One is endurance. That word endurance, it has a specific Greek meaning. It's the Greek word, and you don't really need to know it, but it's hupomeno. And it means to bear up under. So when it said, let us run and bear underneath as we're doing this. As we're running our race or doing our walk, we're to endure. We're to bear up under the things and it goes back to both the sin, it goes back to the entanglements. Those things that hinder us from our walk, that's what we're supposed to bear ourselves under. But the second one is race, and that's more fascinating than the first one. Because the word that they use for race here is agonai. What does agonai sound like? What English word does agonai sound like? It sounds like agony. Tell you what, when I was younger, when I was in junior high, I ran. I was a runner, and I would run. We'd run at school. I'd get home, and at night I would go run. And some of my favorite times to run was in the dead of winter. And my mother would, you're going out in shorts and a t-shirt, and it's 40 degrees? Yeah, Mom, I'll be back. Because if you run, your body temperature comes up, so it's not something like that. But I would love it by the end. The cold on my legs, the little pinpricks and stuff. I like that feeling. But the whole process of running, you could see your breath. It kind of showed your progress. you could see your breath, and it was something that you could see ahead of you. It proved that what you were doing wasn't for nothing. And later, I dropped it because, I got lazy and older. But anyway, but I tell you, we do races and stuff, and at the end, I'm huffing, I'm puffing. No matter how hard I've trained and know how hard I've worked, by the end of it, I'm out of breath. My legs are almost cramping. They're constricting, and that's the picture that the author is trying to show us here. I almost said Paul, but it's not Paul. We don't know who wrote Hebrews. But that agony, that's what the author is trying to get us to, something that is painful, something that we have to watch. He says we're going to bear under the agony. Is being a Christian always going to be a good thing? Is it always going to be a nice thing? No. Sometimes I've got things that I want to do. Some things that I laid down a long time ago. I mean, I watch basically G movies. Every once in a while, there's an R-rated movie comes on, and I have to go, no, I better not, because those kind of movies aren't for me. Or the old music that I listened to that had the profane language, I have to go, no. And not that it hurts physically or anything, but it is. I have having to say no to those things is kind of a hard thing. It's part of that race. It's part of, and Paul puts it like this. He says, I batter my body to get it into condition for the race. He's another one that talks about running a race. And that's part of it. When we're training ourselves in this Christian walk, we got to buffet our bodies to get it to the place where it can be used for the proper things. And it's that agony, that buoying up under that agony that he says is part of that is set before us. He changes gears here a little bit, and I had a T-shirt at one time. It said cross-eyed on it, and it had Hebrews 12:2, which is this part right here, and it says, "And fixing your eyes upon Jesus," cross-eyed. So I'm looking at the cross. So fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of the faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Fixing your eyes. Now, twice a year, I go to Nebraska. I go up and see my grandmother. In September, she will be 108. Yep. So I go up there twice a year. Pray that I get to see her the next time around. But as I'm going along, and guys, you can back me up on this, there are places along that road. I go straight up 35, and it turns into 135 and up through Kansas and to Nebraska. But I have things that I've picked out that tell me I'm on the right track. If I'm going through, well, the first one is going through Oklahoma City, and we go around the city, and I know the turnoff. It's this very specific turnoff. You got to be in the right-hand lane, because if you're in the next lane, you're going through the city, and you don't want to do that, because I did it once, and that was scary. But you take that turn. That's my first thing I look for. And it's funny, because when you get to Oklahoma City, it's the first time you see a sign for Kansas. What is the city? I can't remember. But that's you start seeing that city in Kansas like every 20 miles or so. Do what? No. It's a big Big city. Do what? Anyway, it's not important. So as you get closer, you see those signs more and more and more and more, and it's like, first time I went down, I hated those signs because it was a tease because every 20 miles there'd be another one, and it was like still 100 miles away. It's like, who cares? When I get there, I'll care. But once you hit the Kansas Turnpike, there's a gas station right there, and I always stop there. And usually by then, my mother needs to go to the bathroom anyway, so we stop there. And that's another one. And then we stop in a little place for lunch, and that's my next stop. And a little bit outside of that, if you look off to the left-hand side as you're driving up 35, there's this statue of a chimney sweeper. And I look for him every time. I couldn't tell you what city it is. He's on the left-hand side as you're going up there. But I've got these landmarks. And I know when I hit that landmark that I'm still going in the right direction. And that's what he's saying in here. He says, fix your eyes on Jesus. He's the one. He's the author. He's the one that created our faith in the first place. He's the one that perfected our faith. And we get hung up on the word perfect, but it only means complete. Our faith becomes complete in Jesus. And he says, fixing your eyes on that. He's your landmark that you should be going on. And then he tells us why in this next one. He said, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross. We look at that word, and it doesn't compute. Because he says in the first one, joy, and then we have cross. And we know what the two means. Joy is joyful. It's beyond happy. It's a fulfilled amount of exuberance, and it's just so much more than just happy. And then we look at cross. Look at what happened on the cross. He was beat. He was spit upon. He had a crown of thorns that was pushed down into his scalp until blood ran. He was beat within inches of his life. He was dragged up to Calvary. He was nailed to that cross. And that wasn't it. That still wasn't it. He still had people that were shouting at him, cursing at him, saying, if you are the Son of God, come down off there, save yourself and save us. If you're the Messiah. So how can we justify these two words, this exuberant joy and the cross? It says, for the joy set before him. And I figured this out. It's beyond being cross-eyed. He wasn't looking at the cross. He was looking beyond the cross. Because beyond the cross is what he was looking for. Because he knew that if he went to that cross 3 days later, he was going to rise again. And if he rose again, he got to take all of us with him. He's willing to go to that death, go to the cross, so that we might have a place. Isn't that awesome? It's way beyond anything I ever deserved. Despising the shame. That's another one. And I don't know about you, but every once in a while, shame is not a word that we use very much anymore. If you talk to this generation, they don't know shame. They don't come. They know a little bit about guilt, but they don't know anything about shame. You know, when I was growing up, we were so poor, and I was shameful of that condition. I didn't want anybody to know, but our clothes told the whole story. You know, the paper sack that I took my lunch in, that you could tell I'd been putting in my pocket after and taking it back home because it was the same bag over and over and over and over. I mean, y'all know that. But I was so shameful for the conditions. That's shame. But he says he despised the shame. The biggest thing that the cross was supposed to do was make the people shameful. So shameful that they didn't want to be there. I mean, we have these paintings of Christ on the cross, and he has this very nice wrapping around his midsections to give him a little bit of dignity. That wasn't it. He was up there for the world to see, and it was for shame. But it says he despised that shame. He says, forget the shame. I'm doing it anyway. Forget it. I'm looking through that cross and I see that goal in sight. I see where I should be. The last part says it all. And he sat down at the right hand of God. Awesome. During the course of all the practice at the temple and at the tabernacle, okay, the high priests and the priests, their job never ended. I mean, they would kill animal after animal after animal after animal after animal. It was never ending. They never sat down because their job was never done. Their job was never complete. Jesus sat down because that one act on the cross was all it took. It was exactly the cost that the Father said it. He says, this and no more. No more animals. Matter of fact, he says, I want your obedience. I don't want your sacrifices. Because for a lot of people, sacrifices were nothing. Even our sacrifices are nothing. We think throwing a little bit of money into the kitty is a wonderful thing. And then we go out and we don't obey God. But God said, this is the payment I demand. And he took his son, and that was what it took. So when it says he sat down at the right hand of the Father, that he's sitting down because tetelestai, paid in full. No further payment is needed. He did that for us so that we can have a life worth living. And I got to hurry because my wife came out and she goes, in other words, I'm going long and I don't want to go too long. So, all right. Hebrews 12:3, for considering him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. A lot of the things that he did for us on the cross is for us. Not just for our salvation, but if we go back to chapter 11, the one name that we don't see that is Jesus. In that list of heroes of the faith, he should be the top one. He should be that first one because his thing, his example is the one that we should be following before Abel, before all of them. And he did that while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. Do you understand what that means? That even though if we were there at the cross, we would be the people going, save yourself and save us. He saved, sorry, my mind just went blank. These are the things that he did. This is an example that we're going. We need to be cross-eyed. We need to be looking at the cross to see what he did because he brought humanity back. And one day we get to see what man messed up in the beginning, what went wrong with Adam and Eve. We get to see brought back into perfection. And he did that while we were still in our hostilities, while we were still angry at him, while we were saying, no, you're not my Messiah. No, you're not my Lord. He did it for us anyway. As we were spitting in his face, and I'm telling you, at 32 years old, I was a big atheist. And I was telling people, you're an idiot. You follow that Jesus. Even when I was doing that, even when I was spitting in his face, he still loved me. He was still willing to come to me months later and go, my child, it's you that I want. And why did he do that? Because walking this life is not easy. Being a Christian is not the easiest thing in the world. And it's not going to get any easier because the darkness is getting darker. Turn on the TV. Uvalde shows us that. And we just had a woman yesterday go into the airport in our own city and shoot it up. The times are getting dark. So what he did was so that we might not grow weary and lose heart. He's our example. When the world spits you, turn the other cheek. All right, so I'm going to close this up. Anyway, so what does this mean? What does it mean for us? I try to tie things up. So where does that leave us? It's going to be hard, guys. Going forward. The pastor says this almost weekly. And for a lot of us, it's like, I understand. Things are getting bad. I can see the TV. I can see outside my window. Things are getting bad, but they're going to get even worse. See, we're going to go through persecution. We might not be solid in two, but we might lose our jobs for being a Christian. We may be ostracized. And I know there's a day where we're not going to be able to buy food, because that's what it says in Revelation. That if we don't do what they tell us to do, that we'll be cut off. So how do we combat this? How do we say, okay, Lord, I'm a Christian. How am I supposed to stand in the sight of the public and say without a doubt, I'm a Christian, and do your worst? Because chapter 11, because he gave us ordinary people who he worked wonderful things through. Again, these were ordinary people. He's willing to use Rahab, and we still look down on Rahab. I kind of look at her as a hero because I know her lineage. If it wasn't for Rahab, we wouldn't have Jesse. If we didn't have Jesse, we wouldn't have David. If we didn't have David, we wouldn't have Jesus Christ. You had to have Rahab. So, to close this out, because my wife just came out again, which means I've run really long. We have a deal, and okay, all right, I'm closing. Did that mostly because last week I ran an hour, and that wasn't very good. Anyway, guys, the day is getting dark. So when we get it to the point where we think, I can't do anything but give up because I got to feed my children. I got to keep a roof over my head. I got to do whatever. Look to those people. Look to Jephthah. Look to the ones who were sawn in two, those who lost people and only got them back because they were resurrected. Look at those people. But mostly look at Jesus. Be cross-eyed. Look at that cross and see exactly what he did for you. And he did it so that you would not get weary and that you would not give up. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Okay? Father, we do thank you for your word. We always do. Father, I hope that when you do return, you do find those who are faithful to you. Father, I'm very aware that you always leave a remnant behind. I just ask that if you come quickly, I ask that you will find me in that group. And I'm thankful for what you did for me on the cross. And I understand that without that, I had no hope. I had no future. That I was hell-bound and had no chance. I'm grateful for what you did for me. And I look to you. I look to the cross and see what you did for me on the cross. And I pray that you will help me in those days when I get weary, those days that I drag a little bit, and remember that I don't have to fear anything because my God is bigger than anything this world has to offer. Father, I thank you for the blessings you've given me, the opportunity to speak here before this congregation, the honor of being a part of this church, and I ask you to keep blessing us indeed, expand our coast, and remember that we give you the honor and the joy and the joy that you deserve. For all this, we give you thanks in the immortal name of Jesus Christ. Amen.